Yesterday in Rise of Kingdoms, Lilith announced a little sneak peek of the upcoming Archer Garrison commander, the next generation of garrisons for archers, and it was really interesting to say the least. So today, I'm going to go over what Lilith revealed. I'll discuss the unique damage factor, the whole new mechanic they've been adding, what I think of this garrison, and some possible pairings, or what it may impact in the game. So if you're interested in the upcoming Archer Garrison, you want to stick around till the end of the video. So now, let's quickly start off by going over the Garrison Commander skills and all the sneak peeks that we really got. And the first thing that we received was the new Archer Garrison Commander's talent, and it's an Archer Garrison defense. This is pretty stock standard for garrisons. I'm pretty sure Artemisia has the same talent tree, so this isn't too crazy yet. But it's really once we start to get into the skills where stuff gets really interesting. So here are the first two skills of this new Garrison Commander. And to start off, we have an AoE Garrison, which is definitely A, very annoying for people fighting on the open field, but B, definitely going to be quite powerful. The active skill has a rage requirement of 1000, and this is where everything goes from normal to completely insane. This garrison mighty heals a large portion of their troops' slightly wounded units. Now, we don't know what that means currently in terms of what mighty heal actually is, but apparently that's part of their active skill. They're going to heal a large chunk of their units, or a portion. So this could be a percentage. Maybe it's like, as a garrison, they're healing 15% of the garrison. That sounds insane, but it could be something like that, or it could just be a number of troops like 3000 healing factor. Then this garrison will deal a certain percentage of this skill's heal strength as true damage to 5 nearby enemy troops. Every target reduces the damage to each target by 15%. Now this is probably the most confusing active skill we've read ever, because there's nothing like this even in the game. At least smite damage was just active skill damage, but different. This seems to be based off the amount of damage that you're going to be healing. So however many troops you heal, you will deal that as damage. And we can go over these skills and their meaning here. First of all, heal strength is a skill's heal strength. It's equal to how many units it is capable of healing, not how many it actually healed when used. This is including any bonuses / reductions to healing. So this means if a skill has maybe a healing factor of 3000, the heal strength should be 3000, and not actually how many units it did heal. So sometimes healing factor might be 3000 and you heal 10,000. You won't actually deal 10,000 damage, you may only deal 3000 damage factor. And then it's also not damage factor, it's actually true damage. So this damage is not affected by damage bonuses, the attacking troop's attack attribute, or the defending troop's defense attribute. So this seems to fully bypass not only your attack attribute, so you can't boost it, but it bypasses your opponent's defense attribute, so they can't reduce the damage you're dealing. So true damage is, well, I guess what it says, it's literally true damage. No matter what, it's literally that amount of damage factor. So in theory, if your heal strength is 5000, your true damage should be 5000 to the dot. So that is, in theory, how this active skill could work. And as an AoE, of course, 5000 factor would be insane. But when we think of it without attack increases and without skill damage increases, I'm presuming that this heal strength would have to be very powerful for this to be somewhat viable. Without that, this is going to be fairly average. If you're only dealing literally 3000 damage to 5 targets, it's not going to do much. Because even though Zhuge Liang is a 2000 damage active skill, he can boost the crap out of that with attack and with skill damage bonuses, but you can't do that with true damage. So this must be a fairly powerful active skill, and the percentage of the portion of troops healed could be extremely powerful. And this is certainly the first of anything like this we've seen in the game. It is probably, like I said before, more unique than smite damage. So quite interesting to see why they're adding this into the game, and I will discuss some possible reasons later. But it's very unique, and it could be really powerful, or it could be underwhelming. Moving on to the second skill of this Garrison Commander. This commander's archer units gain defense and march speed. We don't know the percentages, but they do gain it. And if they've only got archer units, they deal more normal damage. This includes smite damage and damage dealt by basic attacks. Does not include damage dealt by ranged attacks, but that's what we know already about normal damage. So, second skill here doesn't look like it's garrison related at all. The march speed is useless for a garrison. Defense is good, and dealing extra normal damage, of course, is good for a garrison. But we should note something here. So far, this commander does seem field viable. We haven't seen their 3rd, 4th, and expertise yet, but From the first two skills, there's nothing Garrison related in the active skill, which is always really, really good. In the second skill, there is also no stats that are Garrison related. So this is giving me vibes that this Garrison commander could be open field usable. Of course, I wouldn't jump to conclusions yet. We don't even know the numbers of these skills yet, so we can't even check them out. Until we see more, I wouldn't put a final conclusion, but this definitely does look field usable. Going on to the third skill here, this commander's troop takes less normal damage. We don't know the percentage, they just take less, and that's good in a smite meta, of course, made to counter smite commanders, so it makes complete sense. Then if this commander is serving as a garrison, whenever their garrison is hit with a basic attack, chance to negate all the current target's health and defense buffs for a certain amount of time. So really what we can pull away so far is this commander from their active skill and the true damage, and this third skill, their goal is to bypass everything about defense and health and anything that can reduce damage. This really seems to be just a direct damage garrison that's trying to inflict as much damage onto a single target and I guess an AoE through their active skill as possible. So I'm not sure when this would be too useful, that third skill, the garrison part. Of course, normal damage is good. We don't know percentage, but the normal damage is nice. But the ability to negate target's health and defense buffs for a certain amount of time, I don't really see too much about it. I forget if Scipio Aemilianus has a health or defense buff, but I don't think he does. From what I've seen, it doesn't look like he has any defense or health buffs. He does have health and defense stats, but no buffs. So I'm not sure why this garrison is getting the ability to negate those. Of course, it's better than nothing, but I just can't think off the top of my head which commanders actually buff their own defense. I mean, Herman Prime does. Oh no, he doesn't even buff his own defense. His is a reduction, so I don't see where this skill would be particularly useful in a garrison, but I'm sure it serves some purpose and I am just forgetting where it could be powerful. Moving on to the fourth skill, increase all healing this commander's troop receives. So essentially, that is the way of increasing the damage factor on the active skill or the true damage here, because whenever you heal more, you're going to deal more damage. So increasing this troop's healing tends to be the way to increase their damage, which means skills that would not, or talents that would normally be useless that increase healing now do seem to have a bit more value, because essentially it's like giving yourself a damage boost on top of the healing boost as well. Then if their troop's current target is a rallied army, whenever their troop uses an active skill, the target loses health for a certain amount of time. This effect can stack a certain number of times, and its duration resets whenever it gains another stack. This is really just a bunch of jargon for saying you get a stackable health debuff, similar to Tamiris, Herman, similar to Sargon, anything like that. This is what that debuff seems to be like. So this fourth skill, it seems to be good. I mean, being able to target a rallied army is really mainly for garrisons and swarming, but overall it seems that it can also be open field usable, especially because healing is good for this commander, which generally we don't think of, so that is something we should keep in mind. Moving on to the expertise skill, this commander's troop deals more counterattack damage. That is interesting. And then if the target troop has fewer units than this commander's troop, this counterattack damage bonus will be increased. So this also seems to be a little bit garrison related, just because when it comes to having fewer units than the commander's troop, that is often for a garrison. Of course, it can be on the open field, but in a garrison, when you've got 2 million troops, I mean, if you're being swarmed by someone with 400,000, you obviously have a lot more troops than them, and that would trigger this counterattack bonus increase. So that is something we should certainly keep in mind, and it seems to be this could be used on the open field, but also somewhat in a garrison. So after looking over this mystery archer garrison skills, what do I really think of their kit? And the first thing I think is it's completely unique. Their skills are not what we've seen anything near what we've seen for archers. Archers generally tend to be high, fast-paced damage dealing commanders. This new commander seems like it's going to be a bit more of a slow, tanky, healing commander with an AoE, so I'm sure it's going to pack a bit of a punch, but I don't know how strong it actually is going to be. Will this mark a new meta for archers? It is certainly possible, because really archers are just a slower cavalry, and the only difference they have is the fact that they've got stronger active skill damage, and maybe Lilith is looking to move towards something where they give archers a lot of damage still, but also healing, which is something we haven't really seen before. Archers never really had healing as a main thing. Infantry were always the guys with healing. When we looked at infantry, you had commanders like Constantine who healed ridiculous amounts. You had commanders like Richard who kept healing non-stop. Zenobia, all these tanky healing commanders tended to be for infantry only. But this was really the only time I've ever seen an archer healing commander. Not to mention healing through damage is something we've never seen. And gaining a portion of units, if it's actually a percentage, could be really, really powerful. So This Garrison, I think, is very up in the air. This is something we've never ever seen before. It's not even close to anything currently in the game, and I can't objectively say whether or not it's going to be good. It kind of comes down to the numbers. If we're healing 4,000 units and you deal 4,000 damage, or true damage, it could be decent, and being able to boost that healing through stuff like talents. For example, there are talents in some trees which allow you to heal. I think the defense tree has some. Those talents could make you deal quite a bit of extra damage. So the ability to have those healing effects and healing quite a bit more and dealing more damage, such as through medicinal supplies here, could be a unique way to run a commander, and it could make this commander a tanky archer, something we've never ever seen before, and something that could be completely unique. In terms of open fielding with this new Garrison commander, they don't seem particularly bad on the field. Usually when there's a bad field commander, and I can just pull up an example, the most recent Cavalry Garrison, a lot of their utility is locked behind being a Garrison. So for example, with Eleanor, her whole entire extra double skill or double active skill, she needs to be in a Garrison. A lot of her stats, she needs to be in a Garrison. Even on her second skill, a lot of it is related to being in a Garrison. But generally, when you look at commanders who perform better on the open field, like a Shobunipal, a lot of their stats are not locked behind being a Garrison or rally. So Shobunipal, he's got a little bit behind attacking cities and strongholds, but mainly his stuff is available on the open field. And from what we've looked at with this new Garrison commander, a lot of their skills, a lot of their damage, a lot of their stats and effects like that are completely available on the open field, which means they will be a decent open field commander. Of course, we don't know what the other field commander looks like, so we don't know if that is the case, if you should even run them, but they do look like they could be decent, especially with their completely unique kit, and if the new commander is anything like this commander, then they'll pretty much have to go together, otherwise you won't have the best pairing, and you might not be able to have a super strong march, because if the new commander does true damage through healing, the only other real healing archer commander is like Boudica Prime, and she's only got a healing factor of 800, so if you're dealing like 800 extra damage, randomly on an active skill, it may not be the best thing, and you might be looking for something a bit stronger, which could be through pairing this new archer commander for the open field, which we haven't seen yet, and this Garrison commander who already has the mighty heal and the true damage and all that unique stuff with the open fielding commander. In terms of pairings for this new commander, what I want to hypothesize as a good pairing, really we have no healing archer commanders. You got Ramses, who has a bit of healing factor here, 500, and then pretty much no one else I can think of heals. Ditto does not heal in her whole entire kit to my knowledge. Artemisia doesn't, Thutmose doesn't, Edward doesn't, Tamiris doesn't, Amanaturi doesn't. El Cid does heal. Oh no, he doesn't actually heal at all. El Cid doesn't even heal. Gilgamesh doesn't heal. I mean, he does the exact opposite. And then obviously all of these commanders I'm clicking on right now are just all to deal damage and they don't do any healing. So out of all the commanders for archers, the only one that even has a chance of being used with this new Garrison could be Boudica, if you run around the open field. Boudica is not a good Garrison because a lot of her kit is locked behind being on the open field, the whole entire third skill here, and really she's only got 3 good skills, so if you lose one of those skills, you're down a lot of her open field effectiveness, and that is something, or at least her overall effectiveness, which is something you need to severely consider. So Boudica as a Garrison, especially with a skill damage reduction or a skill damage increase, doesn't seem useful on a commander who is looking to deal more mighty damage. I mean, if you're looking to debuff the target and give him a skill damage, take an increase, when you're dealing some true damage that can't really do anything with that, it is almost useless. So I don't see Boudica as being a very good pairing with this commander, but logically right now it is the only one that makes sense. I have heard some ideas going around about like using a Richard or using Constantine, but from what we can see, this commander's active skill seems to only deal damage from the healing they deal pretty much on that active skill. So really it's not going to be healing over time unless Constantine's healing factor triggers the second the active skill does. You're not going to get 15,000 damage factor, which obviously would be insane, but you're just not going to get that unless you get super duper lucky. So Constantine, I don't think will be a good pairing with this commander unless it makes some crazy like dive bombing march where you dive it into the enemy murder ball and just try and get an active skill off that deals 15,000 damage factor. I have my doubts on that, and I don't think it's really going to be the meta. And Richard, he pretty much doesn't heal outside of his own active skill, which means he's not going to be the best either. So with this new archer commander, in terms of pairings, honestly, I have no idea. I think the open field commander might give us a little bit more of an insight as to what this mighty damage could do and who their pairing may be. But in terms of the Garrison, there is no real solid pairing currently in the game that I could think of who would work well with them. Maybe, I guess you could go with the classic Heraclius Garrison, but Heraclius doesn't heal. He's only got tons and tons of shield factor, which is certainly different to healing. One thing I will say though, Zenobia, if you have a relic KVK and you can switch her, she could be pretty useful. I'm pretty sure she's got some healing bonuses somewhere. Maybe she doesn't, but she's definitely got a lot of healing, which means you could just become a really tanky Garrison. So on top of this, if you wait 1 second, you heal another 1100 healing factor, which of course is going to trigger with your second active skill there. So if you run Zenobia primary and then the new Archer as a secondary as an infantry Garrison, you could have a menacing Garrison there that might be pretty much impossible to kill with the amount of healing and also damage that the secondary commander could be dealing. Now, the final thing I want to discuss about this new commander is why on earth would they add something like this? What is the reason behind putting in an Archer commander that benefits from healing and doesn't care at all about skill damage, which seems to be what Archers were really built on? And I think there's a simple reason behind it, and it comes down to the infantry smite meta. Infantry right now are countering anything skill damage. Anything skill damage based, the smite commanders pretty much are able to demolish it because they're able to get stuff like normal damage reductions, they're able to put skill damage reductions, and you don't need to have skill damage in your mutable to make them stronger. So infantry tend to be really, really good against skill damage right now, and especially against high skill damage cavalry, infantry seem to be doing pretty decent, and that means you can't really counter them as well with archers, because smite damage aren't as affected by skill damage commanders. So if you put a skill damage dealt reduction on a smite commander, especially from an archer commander, they just don't care. It's not going to affect them at all. If you've got an archer commander that's taking reduced skill damage, for example, there are a couple of archer commanders like that, such as Boudica Prime, they're just going to fully bypass that, and that part of their skill kit is completely useless. So I see the reason of mighty damage is to at this point have 3 different categories of commanders. You've got Cavs dealing skill damage, you've got archers dealing mighty damage, and you've got infantry dealing smite damage. Mighty damage is probably going to counter smite damage because it can bypass any reductions. It also can bypass defense and health stats, which I think infantry will probably start to get high amounts of defense and health buffs over the next commander releases. Then you've got the skill damage, which can probably counter all the new mighty damage commanders. That is probably how it would be built, because Cavs can counter archers, and that means mighty damage would be countered by skill damage. And then finally, you've got the smite damage commanders who can counter skill damage, which would be stuff like cavalry commanders. So that is probably the way it's going to go. It's going to make it so that instead of they all being just damage factor, archers have their own type of damage, infantry have their own, and cavalry also have their own. It is definitely something that I think wouldn't be too bad for the game. It's definitely unique, and it would help solidify the rock, paper, scissors mechanic of Cavs beat archers, archers beat infantry, infantry beat cavalry, and it wouldn't be too bad. This theory is, well, only a theory right now though, so we don't know if that is the case, and we'll have to wait to see the open field commander. The open field commander also has this mighty damage, then that is pretty much guaranteed what Lilith is going to try and aim for, and that means it's probably going to be similar to when Leo Chair was first released, something completely different to the game that would try and add a new meta, but mainly only for archers, and we probably won't see mighty damage on any other commanders. Now, if you enjoyed today's video, I just want to ask you guys to please consider subscribing. I know I'm a little bit late to the party on this new Archer Garrison, but that's because I was asleep when it first came out. So if you want to pretty much support this instant coverage, or as fast as I can get it out, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It really does support me, and it also means that the second this commander releases, you can get the fastest up-to-date Archer info from a true Archer main who will pretty much be insta-expertising the open field commander no matter what. So if you're interested in these new Archers, where this mighty damage, sorry, the true damage could be going, subscribing to the channel is the best way to get up-to-date news. Now, I just want to say I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.